You're listening to episode 299 of the Small and Supercharged podcast with Ria Freeman. Well, on today's podcast, we are joined by Kaylie Bloxham, who is the founder of Bloxham PR, who I don't know if people necessarily know you, but they're going to know about some of the brands that you represent. So that's Fairfax and Favour, Jules, Shuffle. Who have I missed?
Le Chameau, West London Shooting School, Farlow's, Calcott Collection, to name a few.
To name a few. So tell us all about you and what you do.
Oh, well, firstly, thank you so much for having me on. Very thrilled to be speaking to you today. So I founded Bloxham PR back in 2014, so 10 years ago. And we offer full circle PR and communications for any brand out there, particularly those in the kind of consumer lifestyle space. So anything from fashion, country lifestyle, sporting, travel, food and drink, quite a breadth of different types of brands. And we cover everything from traditional PR through to the more digital area of PR, influencer, VIP, events, experiential, social media, and all of those sorts of things. And essentially, we're looking to try and get a buzz around the brands that we look after, make them famous for all the right reasons, and get them in front of the right consumer.
And how did you start? 'Cause I mean, it's mad. It's kind of in some ways mad to think that you've only been going 10 years, because like the brands that you've just reeled off, they are such true heritage brands that have been existing for as long as I remember, and I've actually associated you with them all from the start. So it's a bit of a weird one. But how did you get started in this?
Sure. So I did my placement year at the West London Shooting School, who, as I mentioned, a client of ours now, actually, and sort of did marketing there, went back and finished university, which was business management marketing. And after that, I went to intern at a PR agency in London and very much cut my teeth there, and absolutely found PR to be the career for sure. I felt really lucky, actually, because I know some people, it doesn't necessarily come that quickly to have absolute clarity on what you want your career to be. But for me, it absolutely, was something that I loved from day one. So that was really the start of PR for me. And then I was in London for a few years before coming back home to Gloucestershire. And that's when I went freelance. And the beginning of Bloxham actually happened really, really organically. Perhaps in the back of my mind, I always knew I'd have my own business, but it did happen quite organically. Like I said, I was freelancing and it just was going really well and, gaining in momentum. And after about 6 months, it got to a point where I was getting asked to do, more and more and more. And it was certainly too much for me to do single-handedly. So I guess it was a decision to sort of either say no or to look at sort of taking someone on to work with me and building a team and making it, I guess, slightly more official. So having never been very good at saying no to things, I brought someone on board and founded Bloxham and made it all a bit more official. And that's kind of how it all started, really.
It's a big step taking someone on. It's something that I've never done. The whole employing people terrifies me. But it's a big step, isn't it, to go from freelance to one, and now you've got a team. How many people are on your team now?
So there's 12 of us and growing.
Wow.
Yeah, I know, it's scary.
It's
brilliant.
Scary though, isn't it? As the founder, like you have got a responsibility, haven't you, as well, to those people?
Yeah, and I guess when I started, I was in my early 20s and, I didn't have anything to lose. And I guess the team were, a similar age to me and young and, it was all, just a learning, and it didn't actually feel that scary. Like I said, it felt really organic, actually. I think now, obviously, I've got much more going on, and all of my team are much more grown up and have lots going on as well, and so it does feel, yes, definitely an added responsibility and pressure for what you're responsible for ultimately.
And thinking back all that time, obviously I don't know who your first client was, but are there any clients that you work with now who you've been with them through the whole evolution. I mean, one that jumps out to me is, again, I don't know the timeline, is Fairfax and Favour, because when I first knew them, they were little country stands, which you know they share a lot about in their content as well. And you seem to have both been on this sort of wild journey together.
Yeah, absolutely. We're so proud of our relationship with Fairfax and Favour. You know, working with Marcus and Felix, who, you know, believed in us from the start, has just been, you know, an incredible journey. We probably didn't, you know, we weren't working with them from day one. The client that I did launch with, we did work with right up until the start of the pandemic. So that was a really long relationship, and I was actually in house with them slightly before then. A menswear brand called Oliver Brown. So we had a, you know, really long relationship with them. But no, with Fairfax, it's probably you know, it was pretty soon after. So I think we're sort of on year sort of, you know, eight or maybe nearing 9 even. So yeah, we have worked with them for a very, very long time. And others within our portfolio. You know, I will sort of look on our system, you know, the other day, and when you look back at trying to find out the actual start date, it's like scary because you've got no files and everything was run in a different way. And, you know, it's changed so much, not only how we run as a business, but the landscape in which, you know, we work with these brands with has changed, you know, dramatically in that time as well. So, so yeah, but yeah, we have got some fantastic long-term relationships, brands that we've worked with for, yeah, many, many years.
I was going to say actually that the landscape, even in the last 10 years, has just, I mean, evolved doesn't seem to do it justice, actually. You've obviously dealt with a global pandemic in the middle of that, but also, you know, the rise of social and the way that PR has changed has been insane, hasn't it? And what's your take on it?
Yeah, incredibly so. You know, I talked to the younger members of our team coming through now and talk about how, because Rachel, who is very proudly still part of my team now, you know, we laugh because when she started, we had a guillotine and a Pritt stick, and we made press books by cutting out magazines and putting them in. And, you know, we now use a tool called Coverage Book, and it's all online, it's all digital. And, you know, it's just little things like that is just so game changing. You know, so many of the publications that we would have worked with at the beginning don't exist any longer. You know, so many of those have changed. In, you know, even, you know, London Evening Standard, a daily, you know, in the last couple of weeks has announced it's now going once a week. You know, independent newspaper is now no longer a print edition. You know, there's so many changes from the media. Social is enormous and massive change. You know, just certain apps that didn't even exist or were very much in their infancy 10 years ago are now, you know, part of our daily life, and intrinsically important to all of the, you know, strategies that we're working on. I think influencer, what that even means, has evolved quite a lot over that time. It certainly wouldn't have been something that you had as a sort of service, if you like, or a product that we would have, you know, built into client work at the beginning. And now it probably, I don't think there's a single client actually that we're working with that doesn't work with it in some, even a small capacity. So yeah, it has really changed. And I think also because of those changes in terms of how people are digesting their media and how you get in front of brands, I think that's also why you know, events and that experiential aspect has also become so much a part of what we do, to engage with people, whether that's engaging with the media or whether, you know, the end user. But I think again that's become increasingly because of the pandemic when we weren't allowed to do any. But yeah, so I think, you know, how I think it's become so much more multidimensional. I think in the beginning when we just did traditional PR, it felt quite straightforward and, you know, not so many cogs turning all at once. Whereas yeah, now it's really multifaceted. For the majority of brands that we work with, it's very 360.
And that's the thing, isn't it? When I think back to the old times, and it was like PR, it was, you know, you worked with magazines, you looked at features lists. There was a lot to do, but it was just it was kind of in the same area. Whereas now, obviously, as you
Mm.
say, you know, quite rightly, magazines, newspapers, some have vanished, some have gone down. I mean, most of them, I'd say, there will be some that buck the trend, but their circulations have definitely gone down. Um, And you're having to do actually quite different tasks. Writing a press release is very, very different to, creating an influencer marketing campaign and picking those people and doing video shoots for reels. How have you kind of adapted to that, particularly across a whole team?
Yeah, I think you have to wear so many hats now, like you say, and those different elements can feel really different. Sitting down and writing a press release is very different to running around after, 15 influencers in a field, getting them to an event or whatever it might be. So yeah, I think you do have to have that sort of breadth of knowledge. And it can often, feel quite a lot. I think one of the benefits is that I was going to say me and my team. I don't know whether I can include myself anymore or not, but my team, we're a young team, and I think that does help because it's balanced with that knowledge and expertise for sure, and experience, but that sort of youthfulness coming through means that actually so many of the team here are, digesting, they're the ones that are digesting the media in a new way, in a different way, say, to how I am. And likewise on sort of, social playing that massive role, they're at the forefront of these changes and understand them. And so I think from a tech perspective and that digital aspect of coming through, I think that, that's something that has meant we've been able to organically change. But I think it's also just about being really, forward thinking as possible, and really absorbing what's happening with the industry and listening to our clients. And also I think an advantage that we have is that we, for the most part, are the customer that our clients are trying to get in front of. And of course that's, scalable either end of that. But it means that we kind of live and breathe and understand. So we're just then trying to work backwards in how we, sort of execute a campaign to reach us. But I feel that we then have that innate understanding, which I definitely think helps, because we've already got our head in the game. We get it. So yeah.
Which of the kind of things that have appeared part of the PR mix, but particularly over the last few years, do you think's been the most exciting, or the one that's perhaps moved the needle the most for your clients that you work with?
I think a lot of the, if we go back to, I guess, the traditional PR and working with the media, I think before, like you say, it would have been quite transactional. So you would pitch a story and they would run it or not. And that was kind of, and you'd really focus on the column inches. And I think the titles themselves, in order to survive, have had to change their models. So, I think whether that's, adding then digital and adding in-person events, or adding a podcast, or, the Times are now doing Times Radio, and the Country and Townhouse have their, awards and their, Great British Brands series of breakfast. And there's such a plethora now of different add-ons to all of these things. And so I think that allows brands to work with the media in a more of a partnership, and that then becomes more of that 360. And I think that's a little bit more exciting, I suppose, because it kind of feels that rather than just a one-off, it's about building that partnership and I guess that mutual collaboration, because I think brands and the media and us all understand that in order for it to all work, we all need to work together. So I think that is something that's quite positive, and perhaps a change is that sort of, bringing it to being more than just that one transaction. And then I think, social, obviously when you think of social, you think of it as, just literally scrolling through the app on your phone. But I think, the reality is, in order to get that content, what goes behind it. And I suppose that is then opening up this whole world of events and content generation, and the way that brands, shoot their content, whether that's, their campaign content or whether that's working with influencers. But I think that's really changed. So whereas I suppose brands previously, I guess I'm speaking more on a sort of fashion perspective in this instance, but they would have done, autumn, winter, spring, summer, maybe a resort shoot. Whereas now it's much more around, creating more moments. So, yes, those seasons, but then those special brand moments, the campaigns, focusing more on storytelling to engage that consumer, because yourself, you're not going to be scrolling and engaging with just reams of people putting product in front of you. So it's about how can we do that, but in a really subtle way. And I think that storytelling aspect and working with people to help brands tell that story, I think does, has been a big change. I don't think, unless you're in the industry, you probably quite get the back, the behind the scenes of bringing that to, the absolute enormous amount of work and effort that goes into creating all of that content that we're then just scrolling past. And, you're sort of, the impact and success of that is whether you sort of, sharing it and saving it and liking it. And I think, yeah, it's huge, but I think in the same breath, it's really exciting, and it does create this whole new, world of brand storytelling that I think perhaps wasn't there in the same way before.
Looking at, again, thinking some of the brands that you work with, particularly the size of the following that they've got, let alone mailing lists and things like that, it gives you a bit more, I don't want to say control because that's not the right word, but in the olden days, it used to be that you work with the magazine or a newspaper or whatever, you put your press release out there, you work with them, but actually whether or not it made it to the page, you couldn't control everything about it, could you? If a massive story came in, your story might get bumped. But now, if you decide you're putting something out on social, if you decide you're sending a newsletter, you've got more control over some aspects of it. Companies are now like media companies in their own right. Obviously, that comes with all the content creation, all the photography, everything else. But I find it more kind of reassuring that there's still those communication channels, but it is a lot more work. I mean, what's your view on it?
Yeah, I think there's a brand can be quite agile and really reactive. And I guess that is sort of like what you're saying, they've kind of got more control. They can you know, put something out there and respond to that. Or if there's this big thing going on, they can hold back. And I think they can be a bit more fluid in their strategies for sure. So I suppose being able to be quite nimble, and particularly for those sort of smaller brands, is probably, really helpful and allows. I think the good thing about social is I think before, the bigger the budget, bigger the voice, the more you got out there. Whereas I think through social, there's some really amazing opportunities, and you see often campaigns that, get fantastic engagement and reach. And that's, doesn't necessarily have to be the biggest budget or the biggest brand. And so I think it kind of gives almost a slightly more level playing field, and everyone has their voice, and it's about being really creative to get out there. And there are some really exciting creative campaigns that you can work on that, don't cost the earth and can get almost, as much, pick up as, those that are slightly, bigger and more polished. I think the fact that they can communicate direct with the consumer and get direct consumer feedback is also great. And to be able to kind of test and learn a little bit more, I imagine before it was, you're investing quite a lot of money on this one campaign, for example, and you almost can't really sort of teaser it too much. Whereas I think with the social aspect more, and like you say, sort of whether it's, email marketing or in person, I just feel like it just, yeah, you can perhaps be, more agile, test and learn. And I think in startup brands and those brands that are sort of finding their feet or looking to pivot their strategy, I think that can be really beneficial.
Yeah, I think for startups and small brands, and we saw, over the pandemic, a lot of people started up businesses. I think quite a number of those have perhaps gone away now, but because of social, because of the aspect, the access to that end user immediately, it did allow people without any budget at all to start experimenting, to start speaking, to start storytelling, which I think is really exciting.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing a massive kind of trend at the moment where um, brands are seeking out those more authentic storytellers, because they don't all have, enormous budgets. And so you have to look at, and I think also the consumers sort of turns off a little bit when there are, you know, there's certain, you know, I know myself, and I'm sure we'll say, you know, there's certain influencers you follow because you want to be just be churned what, you know, what you should be wearing, and that's really helpful. And that absolutely has its place. But if everything was like that, it would get very boring very quickly. So I think, you know, people are looking for that sort of, you know, that, whether it's they're promoting a product or a place or an experience, but it to come through organically via the story that they're telling, you know, what they're known for, whether that's, you know, being an amazing chef or a farmer or a sporting person. And I think that, you know, can really speak to the end user. And that's an example of where it doesn't always have to be, you know, we all have the budget for David Beckham, fantastic. But, you know, you can find people that are really, really fantastic in their field, that can really authentically live and breathe the brand, and get it in front of a really engaged following that doesn't have to be, you know, huge. It doesn't have to be paid for with ads splashing all around it if it feels much more, yeah, authentic and engaged.
Definitely. And thinking about all of the stuff that you do as Bloxham and as yourself, because you do loads of different things. What's the bit that you really love the most? If you could kind of, you know, if you could just focus on that one thing, or the thing you get the biggest buzz from.
It's hard to say one thing, actually. And in a way, I would actually say my favorite thing is when a brand allows us the sort of free reign to do actually all of the different aspects around one campaign and have real ownership on that. So when I say all of the different aspects, I mean looking at, you know, press, traditional sort of earned media, VIP, influencer, event, and doing all of those, putting it all together, because then I think what gives the best buzz is when you then see it as a collective, because all of those cogs have worked together and it really delivers against the client brief. I think sometimes what's tricky is when you have a brief and you're just responsible for one aspect without sort of the control over those other bits. And so however hard that one part might have worked, the impact of it, if everything else, you know, isn't happening, isn't always realized. So I think, having the sort of, trust to do a full circle campaign is probably where we then get the greatest buzz, because that's when you kind of get people going, oh my goodness, I saw that, you know, campaign that you worked on, or we can see when we're doing the wrap report for that campaign, you know, across the board, the reach and it just feels more impactful. You know, that's not to say when we focus on one thing in isolation, it isn't really great, but I guess it just doesn't have that sort of same gravitas that a full campaign would have.
Yeah, no, I completely understand that. Yeah, one of the things that I see, I guess, on social or in real life that does make a massive impact is the event side of it. I mean, obviously during COVID, we weren't allowed to do any events. We weren't allowed to stand more than 2 meters away from people. We had to stand more than 2 meters even away from people. Was it quite difficult getting back into the event side of it? Because so many brands, companies, everyone really learned to operate really remotely and do really well at it as well. Was it quite difficult getting back into that from maybe like a personal or a team view, and also from the brands as well?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I completely forgot was the amount of effort and resource that is required for them, because we did do loads, and we got to a point where we were actually running the press office events when they were still happening. And then obviously no one did anything. And then we got back to doing events and we were so eager and keen to do it. I did completely forget, I have to be honest, how all consuming they are. And when you asked that previous question actually about what one thing is my favorite, I would say events are the best and worst, in the sense that in the run up, I mean, it's full on and it's so much more than, the day to day. So it does require absolute all round buy-in from the team for sure. And it's always that sort of, will it be all right on the day type thing. And all, the best laid plans, there's always something that you can't, anticipate. But doing it and getting that energy from people, and then that feeling afterwards when you've delivered it, is fantastic. And so events are an yeah, very central to lots of what we do, and it is something that I love. I think for me, and the team, it was just a case of, yeah, getting our head round to sort of having that energy to host and to talk. And I think there's so much that goes on behind the scenes that we're really in tune with, making sure everyone's having a really great time and the client's happy and the guests are happy and everyone, all the deliverables are getting ticked off as you're going through the day. That it, you know, there's so much to it. And I think it's, yeah, it does require that real energy. And when you've sort of been, you know, at home on your own for a while, that is quite like a different way of working. But I would say that it's definitely an area that all of my team thrive in, and it's something that they all do, you know, love working on. So I think in terms of getting back to it, we perhaps adjusted pretty well, because I think there was just that hunger to be able to get back out and doing it. So yeah, we're thrilled that they are, yeah, back in full flow. But you know, what I would say is post-pandemic is, I think I feel like it is getting slightly better, but initially I think it had created the sort of flaky culture, and it was alarming how many people would sign up to things. And this could be anything from, you know, an overnight press trip away where you know, it's limited, it's really sort of intimate numbers, you know, to a dinner, and the brand, you know, and the team have worked so hard for it. And then people, you know, obviously things happen and that's, you know, completely fine. But it did definitely feel like more things were happening, because I feel people just got into a habit of just being able to go, oh, I don't fancy that tonight, I won't go. So I think that added pressure. So that was probably the tricky thing, is just adjusting, not necessarily from our approach to events, but more the guests and how people wanted to react and interact, and people's expectations. And that probably has taken a little bit of getting right. But yeah, I think now we understand expectations of guests more, and can inform our clients and be really realistic in managing their expectations too. And so I think that's definitely got much better.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that's a really interesting point. And it's interesting that, you know, you've had people say, yeah, we're in for it, and then not turn up. It's really difficult, isn't it? If you've got a certain number of places, because you're then thinking, well, actually, I could have given that to somebody else. I could have done other things, and you're not able to do that, which is a bit of a
Yeah,
kick, really.
it's an extra dimension for sure to deal with.
I'm thinking of your whole Bloxham journey so far. Have there been any lows along the way that you've thought, this is hard, I want to go and work for somebody else that will pay me money, I don't have all this stress? Although, I mean, I think I'm technically unemployable now, I think, as a standalone person. I've got too many opinions. But it is hard working for yourself, let alone when you've got a team.
Yes, I mean, I won't dwell on the sort of bits of the pandemic that were difficult, because I think, you know, what we experienced that was difficult would have been very much the same as everyone else. But I think since then, personal highlights in my life have, of course, been having my two children. But the impact that's had on me running the business has been me learning to work in a completely different way. And I think where before, say pre-children, I would, you know, if a job needed doing, I'd work, you know, all hours across the weekend, I get it done. I could just put everything 100%, 110% into all times, all energy, all focus. And, you know, that made sure I could stay on top of everything. I think the challenge now is I just don't have that ability to do that. There are a certain amount of hours that I can do, and you know, there's commitments that I have to do at home. And I think you know, sometimes that for me feels that I can't necessarily be there for my team as much as I'd like to, for example. And I so some of my team have been with me, you know, a long time, and pre-children, and some of my team haven't. And I almost want to sort of allow the team that haven't to sort of see, I almost want to say to them, look, I haven't always been, you know, had to leave at this time, and had, you know, a semi-fried brain from lack of sleep. Because I sort of think maybe they sometimes look at me and go, oh, you know, part-timer, but it, you know, I'd like to think they don't. But, you know, I think on social media, you know, I follow lots of sort of inspirational, you know, business owners and founders, you know, and lots of them perhaps don't have children yet, and haven't got to that sort of stage. And they're all sort of, you know, getting up at 5, going on doing their reformer Pilates class, doing a bit of, you know, blocking out their day, and it all goes to plan. And then, you know, da 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 da. And you know, in contrast, I've, you know, yeah, before I've even left the house, I'm sort of in tears because it's all just gone so wrong. And so I think, you know, you know, like I say, having children, absolute best thing I've ever done, and, you know, absolute, you know, proudest thing for sure. But it does, having that sort of home life commitment does definitely impact. And I think the sort of lower moments have been where I've just not been able to give the time or the headspace, you know, to something that I know needs it. And I think those moments are really difficult. And, you know, there are times where I've just known that things will go a bit wrong and there'll be some casualties, whether that's, you know, a client or a team or whatever it might be. But there wasn't another option, because you know, I felt like the priority had to be at home. So I think that's where that's probably where I felt it the toughest. You know, of course, when you know, low is like a client handing the notice in when you think you've done a fantastic job, or, you know, likewise a member of the team who you really value is sort of, you know, relocating, and you know, that obviously feels sad, and you know, those moments will always feel, I think, because you're so invested in the business, they'll always feel a bit like a personal rejection to me. Probably something I'm working on. But, you know, that you'll always have that. But I think, you know, those things are part of the course. And I think, you know, you learn and you put coping mechanisms in place to make sure that, you know, every time that something happens that, you know, you could consider a bit of a failure, you learn by it and you move on. So I think really for me, the lows have more been from where I felt like I haven't been able to be 100% at something, because of, yeah, home life and things like that.
No, the juggle is hard. I mean, I've got 2 kids, and I remember, oh God, it was a few years ago now. I was involved in a project, and I'd worked really, really hard on it. And the day I decided to take the children out was the day that seemed to slightly disintegrate for no good reason. And I was sat there, they were on this play area, and I was sat there just like doing emails, calling people, getting crosser and crosser. I didn't have my computer with me. And I was like, I did everything to stop this happening. I did everything to stop this happening. And now I'm not being good at either thing. I'm being
Yeah.
a rubbish mum. And because I don't have my computer, I'm doing the best I can. But if I could do one or the other, I'd be good. But I've got to try and do both. And it's not going well for me. And it's just, it's so difficult. As when I think you're absolutely spot on. When you look on social media, you see people who are like, oh, we're smashing our goals and we're doing this. And you're like, yeah, but did you have to make a Victorian outfit for your 2 children this morning? And has one of them, you know, I mean, one of mine got headbutted by a dog yesterday. It's just the random stuff. It's just stuff that you just deal with in your life. And you just think, how is this a thing? You know, one minute you're doing something kind of really cool and you're like, you know, winning at life. And then you go to school and your kid's done something crazy and they're covered in paint that you know is never going to come off them. Or, you know, I don't know if you get this from your child's school, but I get texts like, you know, such and such has had a head injury. Okay to stay at school. And I'm like, the one was when I was on a call with a client, and I had 2 of those because they'd run into each other.
Oh God.
But you think just the way it messes with my mind, because I'm on one thing, I'm like focused, I'm like, yes, I'm good at this. And then you just get something completely random that moves you off from the other thing. It's really hard. And I don't think enough is said about how difficult it is, because it's not that you're not hugely passionate about your business, but it's that you are the only person that can do some of the tasks. You know, you can't just go, right, kids, you just amuse yourself. I need to go and do this for a few hours. That police would not like that. It's really hard, particularly when you, like you have spent so long building up your business to the point it is now, and then you've got to go, yeah, I love you still, but I have to do this.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think, I'm very lucky. I've got a very supportive husband who absolutely picks up the slack. So it makes it much more possible than it would be otherwise. But, I think that's the thing. I couldn't be more passionate about the business and about the team that work for me. and doing the best for them and for our clients. And that, it means so much to me, for that to all be going well. But of course, I equally, my children are young, everyone's, time goes very quickly. And so there's a level of which I'm not prepared to sacrifice. And I think it's trying to do that balance. And, some days, like you say, you go, God, how can I be getting out the house so swimmingly? And it's, you feel like you're absolutely smashing it. And then there are other days where, this morning I wanted to get in, Monday, I'm going on holiday next week, actually. So I was like, right, I've got 2 weeks worth of work to do in 4 days. I need to get in early, do it all. And there was a road diversion on the way to nursery. So it took me what would normally take 30 minutes, an hour and 15 to get into work. It just puts you on the back step. But yeah, I think PR is, as you know, it's a job that requires you to really, be really agile in your thinking, think on your feet, whether that's, because you're talking to, an editor, or whether that's, dealing with a client or building strategy or motivating team. There's lots of different hats to be worn, but a lot of it is really sort of thinking on your feet. And I would say, I'm relatively good at that, but I'm not so good at it on 4 hours sleep. And I think it is quite tricky because you don't, I say, you don't want to kind of moan and go on about it because it kind of isn't really anyone else's problem. But the reality is your brain just doesn't actually work that fast when you are on that, but the job still needs to be done. So you do end up, you can't help but be a little bit probably not at your A game. And that's for someone who takes pride in, delivering the best and trying. Sometimes it can be frustrating when you're aware that that's not happening. But, we day by day get more sleep. So hopefully everything becomes a little bit easier. But, and I think it's tricky because I think there's a tendency, like I say, it's the best thing. So you don't want to moan about it and feel guilty in doing so. And also, me pre-children, I would have had absolutely no understanding, empathy. I just really, because I think it's really difficult if you haven't been there yourself. And so, I hope that I now have a better understanding and empathy for whether it's, clients or, when my team go through that I can kind of, sort of be a better support than, I probably would have been having not had that experience myself. So I think it can only sort of, make you a better, person to work with. But yeah, it can be challenging at times.
Yeah, completely. I mean, now we've kind of we've done the lows. What's been the high so far on your journey?
The highs, I think for me, I think it's really that recognition for the work that we do. I love my job, the actual day job. I love running the business. I love the industry that we work within. But it's a lot of blood, sweat and tears that go into that. It's really hard. It's quite a sort of relentless industry, I would say. And so it's really that recognition. And by that, I mean, when you have a brand that you're really familiar with, that's a really exciting brand, and they come to you and ask you to work with them because of the work they've seen you do, their belief in you, that I think is, a really incredible moment. Likewise, the team, whether it's the team that continued to work with me, and that's fantastic, or whether it's if we're, looking for new talent and those that are applying, I think it's that kind of, that belief. And I think it's at those moments where you realize what you've built, because you kind of go, oh, actually, I guess someone can see what we're doing, and someone, people know about us and the work that we do. And so I think it's those sort of small moments that I guess would be my, the highest and the proudest ones. And a great example of that actually is we had our agency press day a couple of months ago in London, and that's something that we would do seasonally. And as I guess an agency that perhaps isn't as known and established as some that would do that sort of circuit of press days, we may have in the past not had the sort of attendance levels or, that we might have wanted. Anyway, this year we hosted it in London again, and we had 4 brands showing. And you know, I was so proud of the brands and the collections that we were showcasing because they were incredibly strong. And I just thought, gosh, you know, aren't we lucky to work with these brands? And this is who we're, you know, we're being part of that journey for them. And also the people that came, you know, some had come, you know, from so far that I was, you know, incredibly touched that they'd made the effort to do so. And, you know, the people that came, you know, were so, you know, such high caliber in terms of, you know, their position and the publications that they came from, or the stylists that came. And that's all credit to the relationships that my team have worked, you know, tirelessly to nurture and develop, you know, that they all, you know, turned out for us. And I think it's, yeah, one of those moments where you're like, wow, we've created something really special here. And seeing the work, yeah, being, you know, picked up, and yeah, it's really special.
Amazing. And if you were to give any tips for somebody who is, let's say, a small business who is starting out, but the thought of PR scares the living daylights out of them, what tips would you give them to help them get on that journey when they are actually starting to build their brand in more of a planned way rather than just a kind of, oh, I put a post up and it did all right?
Yeah, I think it's about having a really honest conversation with, whether it's, you know, deciding to work with a freelancer or an agency or however it might be. I think it's about having that really honest conversation of, what do I need as a brand to be able to start this, you know, journey with a PRE, you know, in, even if it's them doing it themselves in house. Because, you know, I think in the past, we perhaps wouldn't, and, you know, I'm talking really early days here, brands would have come to us and we would have thought, oh, you know, well, who are we to say that, you know, you need to do X, Y, and Z? Whereas, you know, what I very quickly learned is that you have to be really honest and you can do that in a very kind way, which we absolutely always would be. But, you know, you need to be realistic in terms of, well, before anyone's going to take you seriously, you need X, Y, and Z set up. So, you know, you need to have the website at a point that you're really happy with. If you want to have product in press, you absolutely need to have very good quality product cutout images in high resolution, because no publication's got budget to shoot product cutouts anymore. So, you know, the brand has to have them themselves to sell them in. You have to have, you know, imagery, and it doesn't have to be, you know, tens of thousands of pounds worth of a shoot, but you need to have some accompanying lifestyle imagery to sell the lifestyle, the values of your brand. And so, you know, it's those assets that you have to be really honest to say you need those, because otherwise you can't go forward. I think as well, when you're talking to brands that, you know, are at that early stage, I think it's also really important that they look at things in stages. I think it's really easy. So many brands come to us and say, so, you know, we worked with the PR agency. You know, we spent all of this money. We didn't see any return on investment. So now we want to come to you and pay diddly squat for you to prove that you know, and, you know, I would say we have changed the mind of countless brands to believe in PR and that it is a really valuable tool. But I think it would be very easy to walk into an agency environment and then to sell you the dream, not be realistic in what is right for your brand at that stage. You know, sell the dream, dangle the carrot and go, yeah, we can do this for you because we've done it for other clients and da. They sign up to this massive budget, it doesn't deliver, you know, and they're back to square one, but actually, you know, with less budget than they started with. So I would always say, be realistic in what you need. Think of it as stage one. So yes, it's great to know that in stage 2, 3, 4, 5 down the line, this is that 360 massive, you know, campaign that we can be working on. But actually right now, early stage, let's just look at, you know, step one. We'd like to get some nice editorial, a little bit of product placement to help sell through. We would like to do a handful of really strategic, considered, you know, influencer placements, and just really just start gently so that you can maximize the ROI from those things that you're doing. Because whilst they may be really small compared to other brands, you know, it's still often a really significant investment for a small brand. So I think it's just about starting in a really considered way. You know, don't run before you can walk, and find a brand.
Learn, can't you? You can
Pardon?
learn from that
Yeah,
as well.
exactly, for sure. And also, you know, even the bigger brands, you know, you can think, oh, this is going to really work, and then you try it and it doesn't. So it's really important to test and learn. And I think the other thing is chemistry. I think you've got to really, you know, have that feeling and feel really comfortable with the people that you're working with, that understanding, you know, and so I think chemistry is really important. So make sure that you're meeting people where you can in person, if that's possible, to really build that relationship and understand, you know, ways of working. And because, yeah, I think for me, I always say this to the team, when we're emailing a client, I want the client to feel excited that Bloxham have emailed them, because it's going to be some good news, or, you know, it's going to, even if it's sort of, you know, maybe a bit of a challenge, it's wrapped up in a way that we're supportive and we've got the answer. And so I always want, you know, I never want a client to sort of dread getting an email from Bloxham in their inbox. And I also want to make sure that when they get, you know, an invoice from us, they feel it's an investment, not a cost, and it's not a painful thing. It's something that's being part of that, you know, building the brand. And so, yeah, I think relationships, chemistry, and feeling really comfortable and confident that the timing's right, and the expectations are aligned is what's most important.
No, completely. Couldn't agree more. Awesome. And I'll
So
ask you what's to
happy.
come, but I think if people follow you on social media, you give lots of tidbits and lots of snippets for what you're up to and exciting things there as well. So tell us all the places that we can find you online.
So our website is bloxhampr.com. We've got, you can see a little bit more about us, our team, and we're also all the time updating the case studies with the work that we're doing. So that's a really great place to find out a little bit more about Bloxham. And our Instagram, which is Bloxham PR, is regularly updated with lots of behind the scenes from the team, and you can meet the team, you can meet our clients, see some of the work that we're doing, inform and educate as much as we can, and is a really great place to, yeah, follow along and get in touch.
I love the behind the scenes. I love seeing what goes into these things, because it's great to see the shiny things, which you often see on like client pages, but actually the work behind it, I always find that really fascinating. I mean, you always look very, very good humored about it. All of you do. And like, you can see the kind of the connections within the team as well. Like, you're all pulling in the same direction. It's really lovely to see, but seeing the graft, I think that's so important to show as well.
Yeah, no, we have, you know, we work on some amazing, you know, amazing brands, as you've mentioned, some great, exciting campaigns. And I think, you know, generally speaking, you know, highs and lows, but we absolutely, yeah, all, you know, love what we do. And we're, you know, really, really proud of what we do and pleased to have the opportunity to do it. So hopefully that shines through.
Yeah, it really does. Thank you so, so much for joining us today. It's been lovely to chat, and I can't wait to see you continue to grow and do amazing things and just drool over more of the people that you work with. And I mean, as we're talking, Kaylie's got like a wall of boots behind her. So it's basically perfection for me. So I can't wait to see what you continue to do.
Oh, well, you're incredibly kind, and thank you ever so much for inviting me on. It's great to speak to you.